Hey guys, what's up? How is everybody doing? Today is Thursday, October 22nd, 2020, and we're talking Thursday night DFS. This is the Thursday Week 7 DK Showdown picks video here at No Huddle Fantasy Sports, and as always, I thank you guys so much for finding your way here to the channel, but more importantly, clicking on this video. If you're new here or simply haven't done so already, please make sure you are subscribed to the channel. If these videos are helpful, if you enjoy this particular video, if you're looking forward to some Thursday night DFS, make sure you also give this video a thumbs up. Now, we haven't had one of these videos in, a couple of weeks. We did not have a Thursday night game last week, so we're back at it this week with a Thursday night showdown slate, single game slate. We're going to talk about DraftKings specifically here, the pricing, the captains, the flex players, some of the leverage I think you can get, and where I think ownership will go. All of that will be covered in this video, so welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to these Thursday night showdown videos. As I mentioned, we're talking Thursday night football here, the matchup between the New York Giants visiting the Philadelphia Eagles, a 45.5 over-under, so a decently low, relatively speaking for 2020, low over-under on this game here. The point spread as of right now is 4.5 in favor of the home team, the Philadelphia Eagles. Obviously, if you're just talking generally about both of these teams, both not very good teams, right? The Philadelphia Eagles are just banged up and continue to lose guys to injury coming into this game. They're going to be missing now Zach Ertz. They're going to be missing Miles Sanders. They do get Desean Jackson back, which is interesting, but in general, just really, really banged up team in every regard. And then you have the New York Giants, who also have suffered some injuries, not as drastic as the Eagles, but obviously without Saquon Barkley, and just generally not a very good team so far in 2020. Don't have much going for them, both sides of the ball, whether that's defense or offense. So that is the matchup for tonight. And honestly, if we're talking about a 45 over-under, as I mentioned, that's kind of low for 2020, but for this game, I think is very appropriate. I think you can realistically expect maybe a 20 to 13 game, something like that, something pretty low. And as a result, for fantasy football, for DFS, that's obviously not that exciting. But let's jump into the slate. Let's talk about some plays. We are looking to play DFS for the first time in a couple of weeks here on a Thursday. Let's click into this single game slate here, this showdown slate. And as always, we'll start with the captain spot. And I think there's a couple of different ways you can go. Now, in terms of ownership, you're going to see ownership funnel to certain guys. As always, this is a single game slate. So go ahead, play those single guys if you want. Those high-owned guys, but honestly, think about it. You have to get leverage. You have to find leverage here. And so you're going to have to get creative. And on a slate where a lot of guys are injured, it's going to be hard to do so. Now, I usually don't do this. I think it's hard to pass up. I just talked about ownership. I do believe Carson Wentz will get a ton of ownership in the captain spot. But nonetheless, I still believe he is the best possible player to fit into the captain spot for this game. He has been playing better. Now, he hasn't had the greatest season. Obviously, has not yet exceeded 300 total yards, which is pretty disappointing, but let's face it. Who else do you have in this game? You have Daniel Jones, who is just equally, if not the same, than worse in general. But like I mentioned, Carson Wentz is really just doing whatever he can to carry this team at the moment. There's been talk about him losing possibly some snaps to Jalen Hurts. We'll see what happens, but you can't assume that for right now. I do believe Carson Wentz still stands out as the best player for the captain spot on DraftKings here. Last game, 213 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's throwing the ball a lot, 40-plus times, pretty much every single game. But more importantly, we're seeing him rush the ball, which is something we're not used to with Carson Wentz. It's pretty crazy. I mean, that's how he has to. That's the only way he's carrying this team right now, is he's literally doing everything. But he has some 49 yards in the last game, 5 attempts. He's basically had 4 more attempts almost every week this season except for week 1. So that gives him some upside that allows him to have a solid floor, and then the passing game gives him a little bit more upside there. And again, we're talking a single game slate here. If we were talking a main slate, we're not going to be interested in these guys. But I do believe Carson Wentz fits very well at the captain spot. Now, he is the most expensive captain on the slate, so we'll talk about some value plays, how to get him in there, and how to kind of build some lineups around him in general. But definitely Carson Wentz is my favorite spot here. And I do want to mention a couple of things in addition to the reasoning I gave you already. So first and foremost, the coverage unit or secondary of the Giants is very bad this year. They're ranked in the bottom 10 in the league. In fact, both teams are bottom 10 in the league in terms of their secondary, in terms of their coverage. They're just not very good versus the pass. In addition to that, surprisingly, the New York Giants are pretty good against the run game right now. They're actually, I believe, if they're not top 5, then they're maybe like top 7. Eagles are also pretty respectable in terms of defending the run. So basically what I'm saying for you, how do you attack the Giants, at least right now? I think that is through the air, and I think it just sets up very nice for Carson Wentz. And finally, the last thing I will mention, I do like to focus sometimes on pass rush. Will guys have time, particularly if you're going to be playing a quarterback at the captain spot? And in this case, the Giants have quite literally the worst graded defensive front pass rush in the NFL. So for that reason, I think it's a good spot. He should have time. He shouldn't get too banged up. But again, we're talking about the single game slate here. So I do like Carson Wentz for those reasons at the captain spot. Now, two other guys I will quickly mention. Darius Slate, I believe, is the best player to start from the Giants on this slate, just generally. So both at flex and a captain, but I'm definitely interested in playing him a captain. Obviously, I think that they're going to trail. The Eagles, I just mentioned, have a pretty bad secondary, just like the Giants. The way you attack the Eagles is through the air. So I think he's, in general, the best matchup also between a wide receiver cornerback on the slate. He should see a very favorable matchup in that regard. Now, there is some injury concern, right? He's missed some practices. His foot has been bothering him. But if you go back, he had the same exact situation last week. He played the most amount of snaps for the New York Giants outside of a quarterback and offensive line. So there's very little concern for me in playing Darius Slate, and I think he's going to get 85% of the snaps or more. He shouldn't be hobbled by injury or anything like that. If you guys think otherwise, please let me know. But in general, I think he is the guy to own from the Giants. He's getting most of the targets in their games. Obviously, it's not the greatest stat lines in the world, but in terms of a receiver to pick from the Giants, I definitely like Darius Slate. I think he's good for the captain spot. But again, keep in mind, he's going to garnish some ownership, being that there's not very many options. And lastly, I really was torn between two guys. I will mention the first guy is Desean Jackson, but we've played him several times this year already, and the Desean Jackson play was merely for leverage. So if you guys want to go there, I'm not going to recommend it right now. Just keep in mind I may go there at some point. But I do like Boston Scott here. So he is $8,400. The price bumps up to $12,600 when you play him at captain. And obviously I mentioned the Giants are very good at stopping the run. Now, I'm not necessarily playing Boston Scott because I think he's going to do a ton of damage on the ground. It's more of his involvement in the passing game. In fact, if you go back to last year, and obviously Miles Sanders is out, Boston Scott's going to be the guy eating up all of the snap counts for this team here with Miles Sanders being out. But in general, the reasoning I like him, if you go back to last year, he played them twice. So he played the Giants twice last year. Obviously, it's a divisional game. Both of those games, he got the start with Miles Sanders injuries. And in those games, he did very well. He put up he had 19 attempts in one game, 10 attempts in the other, 50-plus yards on the ground. But more importantly, he had 10 targets across those two games. And that's why I want to target him here, is I believe he's going to see 5, 6, 7 targets coming out of the backfield, given that there's so many injuries to that Philadelphia wide receiving core. There's now injuries to the tight ends. So Boston Scott is definitely in play for me. It's kind of that reverse off of Carson Wentz. So I'm obviously going to play Carson Wentz. And then in the event that Carson Wentz, throws up a bomb or something and they still win the game, it should be through Boston Scott. So I do like Boston Scott in addition to Carson Wentz and Darius Slate in probably that order. So Wentz, Slayton, Scott at the captain spot here. So let's throw in Carson Wentz. In general, I'll show you how you can build a lineup around him, one that I think works, but I will talk flex in general. Now, I do like Travis Fulgham, $8,800. He's pretty expensive for Philadelphia, but he is the guy that is benefiting right now from all of the injuries at the wide receiver position for the Eagles. Now you have Ertz missing time, so he's 23 targets across the last two games. He's actually played very well. He's graded very well by Pro Football Focus as a wide receiver. He's turning into a really good player, really solid player for the Eagles. Kind of the only good thing they're so far getting out of this season. But in general, I do like him definitely at the flex spot. If you want to go with him at captain, you can, but in general, I will not be doing that. In addition to him, all of the other guys I mentioned. So I will not be playing Daniel Jones. I do not think it's a good spot for him. He has not done anything, by the way. I know a lot of people play quarterbacks, double quarterbacks, whatever it be, but 100 yards, he's just not playing well. So I will be avoiding Daniel Jones. I'll mostly be avoiding the Giants and pretty much stacking Philadelphia here. But in general, Carson Wentz at flex, Slayton at flex, Fulgham at flex, Scott at flex. I will not be playing Ingram. I don't like him. I believe Freeman's just going to get game flowed out of this. They should trail. He is getting good usage. he's just not getting much usage out of the backfield. You're going to see a little bit more Darius. You're going to see a little bit more Dion Lewis come out of the backfield when they're trailing. So, although I think Devontae Freeman's a solid player, I just don't think he's in my lineups tonight. But coming down here, the other guys I want to mention. So I talked about Desean Jackson. Definitely will be getting exposure to him out of basically out of necessity here. And in general, the scare with him and the reason I'm not probably playing him at captain is the simple fact that we've played him earlier this season when he was the only guy on the field and he checked himself out of games. He's been banged up. So we really don't know what we're going to get here. But I think you can, if he's going to play 80% of the snaps, see 7 to 10 targets most definitely. So I do believe Desean Jackson is in play for sure against a pretty bad secondary of the Giants here. But coming down here, the last guy I want to mention for Philadelphia is Rodgers. So we know Carson Wentz does favor throwing to tight ends, and Rodgers is going to be that guy with both Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz now missing time. There's really no one else left on that team at tight end. But we saw last week Rodgers get, 40% of the snaps, whereas previous weeks he was not getting that. So the indication is that Rodgers is going to be the starting tight end, the tight end that goes out for routes, all of those things you want. He had 3 targets last week too, so I think you can probably expect 5 or more targets out of him. Very good price here at $5,000. Really helps you build lineups. I do like Richard Rodgers. Unfortunately, his price went from $400 to $5,000, but we do like him tonight for Philadelphia. Not playing Greg Ward, not playing either defense in particular. I think both kickers become in play. As I mentioned, it's going to be a low-scoring game, probably a lot of field goals in this game. So if you need to fit a lower-priced guy, that's about as low as I'm coming. And then if you really, really want to go crazy here, Dion Lewis, although I just don't think you're going to see. They trail in games. Earlier this season, he did well, but that was after Saquon's injury. I just don't think he's much in play here. Even when they're trailing, he's still just not getting enough usage. And enough snap counts. So let's build a lineup here with Carson Wentz. I mentioned Carson Wentz. I do like pairing him. Well, first of all, we'll throw Slayton in, as I mentioned. I do like pairing him with Travis Fulgham for sure. Now, you're not going to be able to fit Boston Scott simply because we're really expensive already in terms of the guys we've played. We got to come down to the $5,000 range, but we will come down to the tight end and Rodgers here. That's going to give us $5,400 to spend and try to play with here. And I think you can make that work if you want to go with Desean Jackson, if you want to come down to a kicker. So we will go with a Giants kicker here. And for $7,200, you have a couple of different options. Golden Tate really has done nothing so far this year. I don't know why. I don't know if he's just lost a step in general, but not interested there. You could go with Desean Jackson. And so quickly, we have a simple lineup there, mostly heavily favoring the Philadelphia passing game. I think that is the idea tonight. Again, you got to get some leverage here. You got to make it happen with the players that we do have available. But in general, I am obviously favoring Carson Wentz. I'm favoring the passing game against the Giants. Weak secondary, weak pass rush. I think it's a good spot. We'll see if Desean Jackson pays off, but obviously this isn't a final lineup. We will, critique this, go a little bit more, but those are some of my thoughts for this single game slate tonight. Thursday night, we have the New York Giants playing at Philadelphia, 4.5-point spread in favor of the Philadelphia Eagles. So let me know your guys' thought. If there's anything I may have missed, if there's any interesting news on any of these injuries, if you believe certain players are going to play a little bit more than I may have been anticipating, I'd appreciate all of that. Again, we're talking single game slate here. Have a little bit of fun. Don't go crazy. That's always my opinion. It gets you some exposure to DFS, some fantasy on a single game slate. So consider all of that as you spend your money wisely. But as always, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will catch you in the next video.